So you talked about mutawatir. I'll just pull one thing up, and that will be the review. Is this little um, this chart floating in the sky, right? So that is the review. And then we gave some examples of what is mutawatir. Among the foremost is Quran, different types of mutawatir as well. So on your charts, if you guys are following along, you have the number of chains. So then the first one is mutawatir. We have completed that. Now we move on to the next one, which is mashhūr. And mashhūr, as we have said before, means famous. Mashhūr means famous. Literally, it means famous. But in the Sciences of Ḥadīth, it has a different meaning. So we're going to look at that. If a narration has 3 chains minimum in any of its generations, then it will be termed as mashhūr. Okay. So for mutawatir, how many chains were necessary for mutawatir? Does anyone remember? No specific number. So what was the criteria? Conviction. Yeah. So whatever requires or whatever is required to reach conviction, that was the number. So it differs. As for the rest, like I mentioned, there are a certain number. So what is mashhūr? Mashhūr is a hadith in every generation. You guys remember generation? Every meeting of the narrators, that you can call a generation, right? So you say, I heard from my teacher, that's one generation. Your teacher heard from his teacher, that's another generation. So every meeting of the 2 narrators, it can never drop below 3 chains. What does this mean? This means, for instance, if I'm narrating something, then I'm going to need 2 other people who narrate that same matan. So I narrate from my teacher who narrates from his teacher, and perhaps Hafiz and Amin, he's narrating from his teacher who narrates from his teacher, is separate. And then brother Ahmed, right? Ahmed Abbas, right? So he is narrating from his teacher, who's narrating from his teacher. So that is what is required, minimum. It can go more, but in every generation you have to have a minimum of 3 chains. Does everyone understand? 3 chains. So in every generation you have to have 3 chains minimum. So that is what mashhūr is. You can have in some chains, like, it goes to 100. Some chains, some generations, it reaches 100. Some generations, 1,000. But then if in any generation it reaches 3, then it's going to be mashhūr. Right? Remember what we said about mutawatir. One condition is it has to have that level of chains which reaches conviction in every generation. For mashhūr, if it dips down to 3 anywhere, that is mashhūr. Right? It's no longer mutawatir. So if you have something that looks mutawatir to you, you're examining the report, 80 sahaba here, 90 tabi'een, 1,000 atba'u tabi'een, and somewhere along the line it reaches 3, it's no longer mashhūr. Now it is, it's no longer mutawatir, it's mashhūr now. It's mashhūr. So it will not have the ruling of mutawatir. Right? So that is mashhūr, where somewhere along the line there's there's 3. Now it never dips below 3, however. Those are the other terms we're coming to. It never goes below 3. The minimum you will find is 3. But you'll find 3 somewhere. This means that the narration must have at least 3 chains of narration in all of its generations. Everyone following? The generations are, every era. You have to have at least 3 people in every era saying this one hadith. Like our exercise that we're doing, we have 5 groups in total. So those are 5 separate chains for one narration. So you have to have at least 3 chains of narration in all of the generations so it can be mashhūr. If it goes less than 3, in any generation you found 2 only, then it's no longer mashhūr. And what is the maximum limit for mashhūr? Whatever is not mutawatir. And mutawatir, remember, there's no real number. Right? So something can have, let's say, 5 chains in every generation. It has 5 chains in every generation. Now the question is, are those 5 chains enough for me to have conviction in it or not? If I can get conviction from those 5 chains, that means it's become mutawatir. Even 5 chains can give you the knowledge of mutawatir. Remember, there's no real number. The actual thing is conviction. Now, if it doesn't give me conviction, someone said that Martians have come on Earth, and you have 5 chains of this everywhere, just 5 chains, then that's not enough for me, because it's a very outlandish piece of information. I'm going to need more chains. So that is not going to be mutawatir. It's going to be mashhūr. So it can be above 3, but it cannot reach mutawatir. And it can never dip below 3. And so it's a range. Mashhūr is a range that starts from 3 and reaches right before mutawatir. That is the range of mashhūr. It can never dip below 3, and it needs to have a little bit less than what creates tawatur. So that's mashhūr. So it's still very powerful. A very powerful hadith, just did not meet the conditions of mutawatir. The maximum number of narrations that a mashhūr hadith can have is any amount that does not meet the conditions for tawatur. Okay, so simply put, if you look at the 4 conditions of mutawatir, if you have a hadith that meets 3 conditions out of the 4, then it's not mutawatir, it's mashhūr. It'll be mashhūr because it fails to meet the criteria for mutawatir. Anything that fails to meet the criteria for mutawatir and has at least 3 chains in every generation, that is mashhūr. Okay. So first you have to learn the conditions for mutawatir, and then you see, okay, this hadith doesn't have one of those conditions, and at least it has 3 in every generation, that is going to be mashhūr. Okay, so let's take a look at what is the ruling of a mashhūr hadith. What happens when you have, what was the ruling for mutawatir? Who remembers? Ruling for? No, but what's the ruling of it? Like, what do you do with the, yes? It must be accepted. The what?
The occurrence of the narration.
Yeah, you have to believe that this narration is true, like it occurred. Not that you have to follow its contents. It occurred. So that was the ruling for mutawatir. What is the ruling for mashhūr? A mashhūr narration can be sahih, hasan, or da'if. We will look into those terms according to how close or how far it is from the conditions of sahih. So now the first thing we look at is, number 1, before we even look at this point, mashhūr hadith does not have to be accepted. Mutawatir must be accepted. It definitely occurred. Absolutely. Mashhūr is not like that. Nor the other 2 that are coming up. Those are weaker. So mashhūr, you don't have to accept it. A mashhūr hadith, you have to inspect the chain. For a mutawatir hadith, you don't look at the people in the chain. There's so many chains that now I don't need to look at the guys in the chain. I've reached conviction just by looking at the number. The sheer number of the chains just gives me conviction. That's mutawatir. Now, mashhūr is not like that. There's not that many numbers of chains where you can just have conviction. So now, even if it's 4 chains, 5 chains, I have to inspect the narrators. Look at the narrators. And each narrator has to meet certain criteria. So if all the narrators check, they're good, they've met each other and they're accurate and reliable, then that's going to be a sahih narration. We'll talk about sahih later on. Maybe there's a problem in a narrator in a mashhūr hadith, then it's going to be hasan. Or maybe there's a big problem in the narrators, then that's da'if. So it will follow the rules that are coming up. Mutawatir is an outlier. Mutawatir is different. These will follow all of the principles that we're going to talk about later. Now what is the ruling of a sahih, hasan, or da'if hadith? That's still coming up. So you kind of need to know those to understand the ruling of mashhūr. So we'll get to that. The number of chains a narration has does not necessarily make it accepted, unless, of course, it reaches tawatur, in which case it will be accepted. So now, like I mentioned, mutawatir is the outlier. Mutawatir is so many chains that you don't have to look at the narrators anymore. It must be accepted. Everything else, you don't look at the number of chains. If something is mashhūr, it's 3 chains in every generation, that doesn't matter. I need to inspect the narrators. If the narrators check, they're good, then inshallah I can accept the narration. If the narrator is some guy who's a liar in the chain, in all three chains, there's a liar found in all three chains, then I cannot accept it. Right? So this will follow the principles that we are going to get into soon. Okay. So now let me share some examples of mashhur, inshallah. So like I said, mashhur narrations can be sahih, they can be hasan, they can be da'if. Sahih and hasan are accepted, da'if is not accepted. So we will get into that, but just kind of a FYI right now. So a mashhur narration which is also sahih. What does this mean? It's mashhur in every generation, there's at least 3. And it doesn't reach mutawatir. And when you observe all the narrators, they meet the criteria of a sahih hadith. That's what this is. So 3 chains in every generation and the narrators check. This is a sahih mashhur narration. لا يمس القرآن إلا طاهرون. Only the pure shall touch the Quran. Remember, every generation, so you need to have at least 3 Sahaba as well. At least 3 Tabi'een, at least 3 after them, all the way till us. This is narrated by Amr bin Hazm, Ibn Umar, Hakim bin Hizam, Uthman bin Abil As, and Thawban. So these Sahaba, that's how many? That's 5. 5 Sahaba narrated, but it wasn't enough to give us knowledge of Tawatur, so therefore it's mashhur and it's sahih. When you look at the chain of narration, everyone is reliable, so then it is sahih and mashhur. So you will accept such a narration. Example of a mashhur hadith that is hasan. So what does this mean? In every generation, there's at least 3 different chains in every generation, and it is a hasan hadith. We'll talk about what is a hasan hadith. The narration, la darara wa la dirar. One shall not harm nor be harmed. This has been narrated with various chains. Imam Nawawi has stated that it is a hasan narration, meaning there's many chains, so it's more than 3. It's not on the level of mutawatir, so that means it's mashhur. And then Imam Nawawi looked at the chains and he observed that some of the narrators, they're not so strong, but they're not weak either. So this is going to be hasan. So it's still acceptable. And if you're confused, like what is sahih, hasan, that's still coming up. We're just looking at mashhur. Example of a da'if mashhur narration. So what does this mean? In every generation, there's at least 3 narrators, 3 different chains. But when you observe the narrators, some are going to be weak. This causes the hadith to be da'if, even though there's 3 chains in every generation. So you cannot accept it. And we'll talk about da'if usage. This will probably be next month. اطلبوا العلم ولو بالصين. Seek knowledge even if you must go to China. You see, China's all over the place. Seek knowledge even if you must go to China. This has been narrated through various chains, so it's not mutawatir, but it's not it's 3 or more. However, each chain has harmful defects. There's issues in the narrators. Some guy, maybe he's a liar, or someone over here, he is has very weak memory. There's various issues that you can find in a narrator. We'll talk about that. So it's mashhur because there's 3 chains in every generation, but it's also weak. So you cannot use this hadith. Does everyone understand? So these are 2 different things. Mashhur talks about numbers of chains. Da'if, hasan, sahih talks about authenticity. For mutawatir, you don't look at authenticity. There's so many chains, I got it. And there's no way this could be a lie. Everything else, now you have to start inspecting the chain. Mutawatir is kind of easy. The other ones you have to inspect. All right, let's move on. So if you got this concept, the other 2 are going to be easy. Al-Azīz. Aziz. So some people say, what does Aziz mean? Mashhur meant famous. Aziz means strong. Why is it strong? It's actually not as strong as Mashhur, but it's stronger than the other one. So let's take a look at why it's strong. If a narration has 2 chains in any of its generations, then it will be termed as Aziz. So let's say you're inspecting a hadith and you're like, okay, 3 chains, 3 chains, 3 chains. This is mashhur. Then you come across somewhere where it dipped down to 2. It's no longer mashhur. This is Aziz. As long as it never goes below 2. has to have at least 2. It can be more than 2, but somewhere along the line it must reach 2. Otherwise, it'll be mashhūr. If it's 3 in every generation, that's not aziz. That's mashhūr. 3 in every generation. Let's say you got 3 in every generation, but somewhere it dipped down to 2. Only 2 narrators here in this era. Then it becomes aziz. Okay, so same concept as mashhūr, it's just less. Such a narration must retain at least 2 narrations in every generation and must reach 2 chains in at least one of its generations. What does this mean? Before you get confused, it has to have at least 2 somewhere. If you say, okay, this narration, it doesn't have 2 narrations anywhere, it doesn't have 2 chains anywhere, it's always 3, then that's mashhūr. So it has to dip down to 2, and it can't dip below 2. Somewhere must be 2, it cannot be 1. That's what we're saying. That's all aziz is. So why is it strong? It's strong because when you have 2, it's stronger than 1. 2 is stronger than 1. Couple is stronger than single person. Okay? Maybe some of you took that to mean to get married, so that means you have to get married. If the narration reaches 1 chain in any generation, then it will not be considered aziz. Somewhere along the line, there's only 1 guy narrating it, it's no longer aziz. It has to have 2 everywhere, minimum. And it has to have 2 somewhere. Because if it doesn't have 2 somewhere and it has more than 2, then that's not aziz, it's mashhūr. Okay. It's simple. I'm maybe saying it over and over and it gets hard. We had a teacher, he used to mention something so much that we used to get confused. He used to teach it to us one time, we're like, oh, man, that's easy. He would say it 2, 3, 4 times, we're like, wait, now I'm confused. You just if you got it the first time, just ignore until I'm done explaining. All right, what's the ruling of Azīz? It's supposed to say Azīz there. I wrote Mashhūr, that's a typo. A Azīz narration can be Sahih, Hasan, or Da'if according to how close or far it is from the conditions of Sahih. Same as Mashhūr. Azīz has the same ruling. You have to inspect the chain. Can I use an Azīz Hadith or not? Look at the chains. There's going to be 2 chains somewhere. Look at the chain. See if the narrators are acceptable. If they are, then take it. If not, then no. Same thing with Mashhūr. And same thing with that last Hadith that we're going to talk about. Right? The only outlier is Mutawatir. That one you don't look at the chains. Mutawatir, don't look at the chains because you have so many. There's no need. You can look at it if you want, but you should have conviction through the chains. Let's look at an example of Azīz. Anas and Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhuma, they state that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. This is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. None of you will believe until I am more beloved to them than their father, their son, and all of humanity. You have to love the Prophet ﷺ more than your parents, your children, and everyone. He has to be the most beloved to you. Then you'll have true iman. If you don't love him that much, then your iman is not complete. This is not talking about like an emotional love. It means that if the Prophet ﷺ is telling you to do something and your father tells you a contradictory thing, if you choose your father over him, then your iman's not complete. You should follow him no matter what. Your heart might incline towards your child more than the Prophet ﷺ. That's possible. But who do you listen to more? That's what he's really talking about. Okay, so why is this Azīz? Bukhari and Muslim both narrate this hadith from Anas, and Bukhari narrates it from Abu Hurairah as well. So you have 2 chains. Anas radiyallahu anhu, Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. And then from them, more people took. So somewhere along the line, there was just 2. That's the Sahaba. There's only 2 Sahaba. Then more and more took. So it will never be Mashhūr. Because you only have 2 Sahaba. It can never be Mashhūr. It can never be Mutawatir. For Mashhūr, you'd have to have at least 3 Sahaba. And then it had to, grow like that. And usually a hadith will grow more and more. It's not going to dip down. So when we say Mashhūr, maybe just think about 3 Sahaba at least. Mutawatir had maybe like 7, 8 Sahaba. And Azīz, 2 Sahaba. If that helps you conceptualize. All right, now the last one, Gharīb. Why is it called Gharīb? Gharīb means something that is strange, right? Gharīb means stranger. So he's a stranger because he's alone. He's a lone narration. If a narration has one chain in any of its generations, it will be termed as gharīb. So let's say you got only one Sahabi narrating a hadith, but then there's like 50 tabi'een who took from him, and then 1,000 atba'u tabi'een. It's not going to be mashhūr, it's not going to be mutawatir, it's not even aziz. There was only one Sahabi. So this is called gharīb. Or let's say maybe there was 3 Sahaba, but then 1 tabi'i. That's usually not the case, but let's say that occurred. Then there's also gharīb. There's only one chain. There's no, someone along the line was the sole narrator. Maybe to you, you got like, 50 different chains, but somewhere along the line there was one. Now this doesn't mean the original person who said it, like Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is one, obviously. He's not a narrator. He's the one who is saying the information. The people who took from him, if they are one, then it's gharīb. Okay? This is in regards to the number of chains. The number of chains a narration has will not remove it from being gharīb if it has a single generation with one chain in it. So let's say, like I was mentioning, every generation has 50 people. You're like, oh, this is mutawatir, every generation. But then somewhere you found one guy in one generation. Now it's gharīb. Right? So to be mutawatir, that condition is very strong. You need to have a huge chunk in every generation. If it dips somewhere to 3, now it's mashhūr. Dips somewhere to 2, aziz. Dips somewhere to 1, it's gharīb. What's the ruling of gharīb? Same thing as mashhūr and aziz. A gharīb narration can be sahih, hasan, or da'if, according to how close or far it is from the conditions of sahih. We're going to talk about the conditions of sahih. So gharīb, it doesn't mean just because there's one chain that it must be a da'if hadith, I have to reject it. You still look at the narrators. Even if it's one chain, maybe all the narrators are really strong, so then it's going to be a sahih hadith. So it's sahih and gharīb at the same time. Just because a hadith has only one chain, it does not mean that it is a da'if hadith. It can still be sahih. I'll give you an example of that, a very famous example. Maybe it'll shock some of you, this example. Example of a gharīb hadith. Does anyone know before? Yes. MashaAllah. Right? So Imam Bukhari says, Humaydi, Abdullah bin Zubayr told us that Sufyan said to him, that Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari said to him, that Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Taymi said to him, that he heard Alqama bin Waqas al-Laythi saying, that he heard Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he was on the minbar and he said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. That hadith. So I just read the chain to you. The hadith is all the way in the bottom. Actions are just according to the intentions. Every man will have what that person intended. Thus, he whose migration was for the world, so he may have it, or for a woman, so he may marry her, then his migration was for what he migrated. It's a very famous hadith. But it's gharīb. Why is it gharīb? Where is the single narrator? Umar is the only Sahabi who narrates this hadith. There's no other Sahaba who say this hadith. You can't find it anywhere. And the only person who narrates it from Umar is Alqama. No one among the tabi'een narrates it from Umar except for Alqama. And from Alqama, no one narrates it except for Muhammad bin Ibrahim. No one narrated from Alqama except for Muhammad bin Ibrahim. And from Muhammad bin Ibrahim, only Yahya ibn Sa'id is the sole narrator. So it's gharīb in generations. Umar is the only one, then Alqama is the only one, then Muhammad bin Ibrahim is the only one, then Yahya ibn Sa'id. From Yahya ibn Sa'id, it spread like wildfire. Then it became super famous. This is a gharīb hadith, but it's sahih. Even though it's only one chain in various generations, when you look at the narrators, they're all really strong. So Umar radiallahu anhu, Sahabi, is above the law. Then Alqama, super strong. Muhammad bin Ibrahim, acceptable or very strong. Yahya ibn Sa'id, very strong. That's why it's in Sahih Bukhari. All the narrators are very strong. So it doesn't harm it because it has one chain. Of course, it's better if you have more chains. It's corroboration. But you still observe the chain on a gharīb hadith. So just because a hadith has multiple chains doesn't make it sahih. Just because a hadith has one chain doesn't make it da'if. You still have to observe the narrators, unless what? Unless if a hadith has so many chains that is mutawatir, now you don't have to look at the narrators. Mutawatir, don't look at the narrators. Everything else, check the narrators. So mashhur can be da'if, gharib can be sahih, if the narrators check. Right? Little chart here. Mutawatir, enough chains which grant certainty. Mashhur, 3 chains or more, and it doesn't reach mutawatir obviously. Aziz, 2 chains, gharib, 1 chain. So these are the terms in regards to how many chains a hadith has. So if a muhaddith says, this is an aziz hadith, it means that it's pretty strong because there's 2 chains everywhere. And if he says it's gharib, somewhere along the line there was 1 guy. Okay. Now we move on. So all of these terms, they're part of the sciences of hadith. Mutawatir scholars say that it's not really something muhaddithin really care about. Why don't they care about it? Because their job is done, right? For mutawatir, they don't have to do anything. If everything was mutawatir, muhaddithin would just become fuqaha instead. There's no job for them, right? But when you got mashhur, aziz, gharib, now they got their job starts coming into play. And when was this narrator born? When did he meet that person? Do this, do that. So that's what those other ones. Mutawatir is in a separate category. They don't have to do anything. So that's why scholars, traditionally, they wouldn't even mention mutawatir in the books of hadith. Ibn Hajar, he mentioned it. All right, moving on. Now, mashhur, aziz, gharib. What was a common factor between them that was not found in mutawatir? Does anyone know? What do you have to do for mashhur, aziz, gharib that you do not have to do for mutawatir? You have to check them. So if you have to check them, we have a term for that. Al-Khabar Wāḥid. Khabar Wāḥid, check the narration now. If it's not Khabar Wāḥid, it's mutawatir, don't check the sanad. That's all this is. Right? But now, some detail regarding that. Al-Khabar Wāḥid, it literally means the narration of one person. That's the literal meaning. But the term actually means mashhur, aziz, and gharib. They all fall under what's called Khabar Wāḥid. Okay. So the science of hadith relates to the chain of narration and how the transmission is retained or affected by the narrators. Simply put, hadith sciences deals with inspecting the chain. So that means mutawatir is not something you have to worry about in hadith sciences because you don't have to inspect the chain. This aspect is not found in mutawatir, but it's found in mashhur, aziz, and gharib. Mashhur, aziz, gharib, look at the chain. Mutawatir, you don't have to. Scholars have termed these last 3 types as the plural of al-Khabar al-Wāḥid is akhbar ahad. That's just a plural. If you want to know, maybe some scholars are saying akhbar ahad. It's the same thing as Khabar Wāḥid. Al-Khabar al-Wāḥid is one, akhbar ahad is many. So anything, the realm of mashhur, aziz, gharib is the realm of hadith. This is where scholars of hadith will focus their attention on, not mutawatir. A Khabar Wāḥid literally means the narration of a single person. However, the term refers to anything which is not mutawatir. So all you need to know regarding this slide is, if it's not mutawatir, it's a Khabar Wāḥid, which means you have to inspect the chain. While a mutawatir narration grants certain knowledge, or what's called yaqeen. Mutawatir hadith or narrations give you 100% surety. We talked about that yesterday. Khabar Wāḥid doesn't do that. Khabar Wāḥid does not give you certainty. And most of the hadith are Khabar Wāḥid. Almost every hadith, I mean, there are some hadith in Bukhari which is mutawatir, but a majority of Bukhari is going to be Khabar Wāḥid. So it's not 100% sure, but still we take it. And so I'll talk about how many percent is it. It's not like 2%, don't worry. Right? It's more than that, inshallah. Okay, so only mutawatir gives you 100%. The others, mashhur, aziz, gharib, or what's called Khabar Wāḥid, we just use this one term to mean mashhur, aziz, gharib. It doesn't give you 100%. If something's 100%, it's mutawatir. And if it's not 100%, then it has another term. It's among Khabar Wāḥid. Okay, a Khabar Wāḥid grants a person probabilistic knowledge, which is in Arabic it's called dhanni knowledge. Right? I'll explain this inshallah. It is possible the narration is correctly ascribed to the one who said it. It's possible that it's not. Okay, so what does this mean? Khabar Wāḥid. Now, when I say Khabar Wāḥid, I want you guys to think, okay, we're talking about Mashhūr, Azīz, Gharīb here. We're not talking about Mutawatir. Or if you want a simpler version, just say Khabar Wāḥid, we're not talking about Mutawatir. That's all you have to think about. Khabar Wāḥid doesn't give you 100% knowledge. You will not get 100% like surety from it. That's only for Mutawatir. So Khabar Wāḥid, it can give you probabilistic knowledge. It's likely that, it's highly likely maybe that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it. Or it's likely that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it. Or it's like 50-50, maybe he said it, maybe he didn't say it. Or it's a weak chance that he said it. But that is the realm of hadith. When we talk about sahih, it's really likely that he said it. If it's likely that he said it, then it's hasan. And if it's not likely that he said it, then it's da'if. That's why people don't take da'if, because it's not likely that he said it. And that's why you have to take sahih. In our, in Islam, you take what is very close to being 100%. So sahih, let's say, is like 99%, all the way from 90 to 99%. If you're that sure that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said something, 90 to 99% that he said something, then are you going to just reject it? No, you have to take it. Most likely he said it. And if you're like 85 to 89% sure he said something, that's hasan. It's not like so sure, but like 85% is pretty good. What if in school they would fail you if you didn't get 100%? You guys, I would be a janitor right now. Yeah, I'd be out there cleaning this, being a street sweeper. So we don't like it when it applies to us. Then when it applies to the hadith, like, now I doubt the hadith. No, it shouldn't be like that. If something is 85% sure that he said it, we're going to put it into practice. But if something's like 20% sure, it's 20% sure that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it, and then 80% sure maybe some guy messed with it, fabricator, then it's probably more cautious not to take it. Right? So that's the whole mindset of hadith. This is all called dhanni. You don't need to know this term if you want to learn the term. Dhanni means probably. It's probably that he said it. Okay. So I have a chart in the slide after next, and we'll discuss inshallah. But before that, you have mass transmission, which gives you certainty. This is mutawatir. And you have Khabar Wāḥid, which is probably. And that's where you have Mashhūr, Azīz, Gharīb. Right? Now, just because something's Mashhūr doesn't mean it automatically is better than Gharīb. You have to inspect the narrators. So that second list means inspect the narrators. See, you're not going to get 100% surety, but maybe you get 99. If they're really strong narrators, then I'm like pretty much sure that this is Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it. So you have to practice on it. Now, if you want to go the route and say that I only practice on 100%, then you shouldn't accept well, China is mutawatir, but let's say the Bermuda Triangle, that's probably, I don't know, that to me is like kind of like all the occurrences inside it. That's like 30%. I don't believe in that. I don't buy it. But if you buy it, for you, maybe it's 80%. So many occurrences, planes flying over, just disappearing, maybe traveling in the future. Some people think that Iblis's throne is there. Allahu Alam. So maybe for you, it's going to be more probabilistic. If you go that route that I only accept 100%, there's a lot of things that we don't know. For instance, how do you know that you're not adopted? Were you there? Right? How do you know you're not adopted? Your parents, sometimes adopted parents or like, foster parents or whatever, they lie to the child. They're like, you're our child, don't worry. But maybe, were you there? And they show you a certificate. What if they got that forged? So that's not 100%. You're not 100% sure that you're not adopted. You could take a DNA test, but those things go wrong sometimes. Even if you did the DNA test and then the doctor is showing you right there, that's the doctor's word. You don't know the details. Can you read chromosomes and check all that? But you accept it. You take it. Why? Because you'd be foolish not to, right? So many people, like, you got pictures, you got all these, those could be doctored, right? Deep fakes nowadays, deep faking you as a baby over there. So that's not 100% either. But you'd be foolish not to take it. So, when we hear that, okay, this hadith is 99% or 95%, now I'm starting to doubt. There's no reason to doubt. That's really sure. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it. You're sure. You're just not 100%. 100% is something else. 100% is like Allah is there. There's no doubt He's there. But then almost everything in daily life, what you read in textbooks, right, like about science and stuff like that, how the earth is round. Did you go outside of the earth to see that it's round, or you're believing Neil Armstrong and pictures that they took? And a lot of people saying that, the whole moon landing is false. It's a conspiracy theory. Why was the flag waving? It should have been pointing down, right? All of that stuff. So even that's not 100%. That, these are, heavenly bodies are round. We don't know. So when we say that a hadith is not 100%, don't get scared. Everything in life is not 100%, except that Allah is there and these mutawatir aspects. Some things are mutawatir, most things are not.